While editing, another unannounced enlisted alpha popped up for Victory Day, and since it delayed the next video anyway, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about it. Don't worry, this won't turn into the enlisted channel. This video is kind of a follow-up to my last one, since I won't go through the basic of the game again. Instead, I'll focus on the bad and good things I noticed. Let me jump straight to the point. While the alpha was really fun, the game has plenty of problems. Balance, the tank gameplay in general, and the progression system are the biggest ones. There's also the AI, but that obviously has a long way to go, so I won't spend too much time on it. Just know that the bots are still basic as they were before, functionality wise. They also had way more trouble traversing the urban terrain of the maps, although they did get more accurate. Yes, this beta was set in the Battle for Berlin theater, which just means big city. And that's the perfect segue to talk about tanks. Obviously tanks aren't going to perform as much in an urban environment, but the way tanks in general are implemented is bad. First of all, my fears about unbalance came true. The basic tank crews had a T-34-85 and a Panther G. This is already a bit more favorable towards the Axis, but there's two unlockable tanks. The IS-2, which I have no footage of, and the King Tiger. The King Tiger dominates the tank battles, and the terrain doesn't really allow Russian tanks to flank. Of course, it isn't a completely hopeless matchup, but still one-sided. The tank limit is always 2 for faction, which means it isn't even a choice between one heavy or two mediums or something similar. The reason why this matters is that tanks are kind of shit against infantry, which is dumb. HE shells are too weak, especially the T-34's one, they're just pathetic. On the opposite side, anti-tank squads now have rocket launchers, which means tanks are even more vulnerable to infantry.
Yes.
I'm gonna say that with maps this small and tanks this frail, they could sure use a buff. Also, for whatever reason, the whole machine guns aren't functioning. Since you can't select it, I assume they're gonna be AI controlled, and that's just a feature that's not ready yet. One thing they should remove is the color-coded reticule for tanks. On one hand, it does make it easier to face heavier tanks, but on the other it makes it possible to just find targets from behind a fire. For those not familiar with War Thunder, it has the color-coded crosshair for arcade mode, but drops it for realistic and simulator mode. Also not modeled are cupolas and the various optics, and I don't think they will be anytime soon, especially optics. Another thing that I was probably wrong about is vehicles in general. Maps aren't big enough to justify adding trucks, half-trucks and whatnot to squads. One vehicle type that they will add, in fact is kind of in the game already, is planes. Now, if you've played War Thunder, you know that close air support is fun to give, but very frustrating to receive. Also, if it followed the same type of vehicle restriction that tanks have, it would mean a constant stream of aircrafts from both sides just wasting time dogfighting while infantry does the job. Tanks get away with always being on the field because they're slow, vulnerable and mostly meant to fight each other. But aircrafts are kind of doing their own thing unless the devs decided to add anti-aircraft emplacement and tanks, and I believe it would be too much effort in addition to slowing the gameplay down. I'm still of the opinion that aircraft support should be relegated to a radioman ability. And I say that because there's already one cancer that had no business leaving the radio. Mortars. There's now a mortar squad that, if you get lucky as I was, has 3 different mortars in it. 3 mortars just means more ammo, but that's all you need. Mortars have a fairly good range and kill absolutely everything. You can spam shell after shell after shell and rack kills like you wouldn't believe. It's not a score issue, of course, it's a terrible balance decision. You can zone out enemies from a cap zone for like 5 straight minutes if you time the shells right. With the radioman's artillery you can at least see the area it's going to hit. It has a big cooldown and it isn't guaranteed to clear the area. Sometimes it just makes marmalade come out of you. It's for zoning, not winning games. Mortars offer no counterplay and will win you the game. They're so powerful that they completely change the meta. You're no longer using every single soldier the best you can. You're now just using all the explosive you have, dying and hopping back into the mortar team as fast as possible to get more kills. It's too strong of a weapon, it just has to go. If if the devs have to keep it because it was the last wish of a dying kid with cancer, I'd suggest replacing at least half the ammo with smoke rounds and add a lot of dispersion in addition to friendly fire. One reason why mortar teams are so strong is because the mortarman class actually comes with a mortar. Well, obviously, you say condescendingly, thinking you know everything, but that's not the case for literally all other classes. Let's say you have 3 anti-tank people. As long as you don't drop another rocket launcher, they might as well be riflemen. The squad leader does start with a specific gun, but the grunts don't always do. It wouldn't be so bad if the squad had a shared special ammo pool. This way, while you still wouldn't have 3 rocket launchers if you don't drop them, having 3 bombers in the squad would at least mean 3 times the ammo. The worst offender is the MG squad. They don't even come with an MG. Instead, the gun you get for the leader is the FG-42. Now, I get that it has a bipod, but it really isn't a machine gun. Functioning bipods might make the MGs not garbage compared to how they were in the previous alpha, but I didn't get the chance of using one. The way you get more weapons is through loot boxes. Well, loot tokens more like. Instead of dropping stuff every game you finish, like you did before, you unlock tokens when leveling up that can be redeemed for a bunch of random stuff. You might get a mortarman, or you might get a rifleman, you might get a rocket launcher, or you might get another rifle. Maybe not even a good one. You can drop your basic bolt action rifle that everyone starts with. It would be way more fair if you could at least farm for an item. Slot machine progression is the worst model the devs could possibly go for. One more thing that's worse from the last alpha is the game modes. The conquest mode is still the same, but push has been split in 2. There's one mode that we call bad push, where the points the attackers have to capture neutralizes at a very slow rate, meaning it's skewed towards the attackers. Then there's Sturm. It's like old push, but this time the attackers have to capture 2 points simultaneously, meaning it's skewed towards the defenders. Well, actually, while I didn't play too much Soviets, I noticed that the Germans won 90% of matches. Maybe it's just the defender's advantage, or maybe it's the result of tank disparity. I don't have a definitive answer to why that is. Now a lightning round for the small things that will probably be fixed, but I want to mention anyway. Spawns are way too forward after you capture an objective. One time I spawned a tank right in front of an enemy Panther. The generic announcer is bad. It might just be a placeholder, but War Thunder has a very similar one, so it might not. The prompt to switch squad member when you die is a waste of time, especially when you're in a tank, since the guy switches to the gunner position anyway. You can skip it by pressing the next squad member button, but it should be automatic. The inventory management is clunky and slow. There needs to be a way to speed it up, like removing items with right click. You can only pick up primary weapons off a corpse, which makes the weapon drop randomness more felt. I was going to praise the devs for dropping the kill feed because it looked very silly when killing big squads, but then it turned out the missing kill feed was a bug. Although it does help with showing how overpowered the mortar is. Speaking of the UI, some messages are in a very inconvenient spot. They added a way to trade 3 soldiers of a rank for one of higher rank. It's at least something to do with the extra bodies, but I can already tell that this 1-minute timer will turn into a 15 days one unless you pay whatever the premium currency will be. The game has no party feature yet, which means that to play with friends you need to find a game at the same time, although this actually worked most of the times, so there's that. Bots really need to be improved. Maybe give them various contextual prompts so they can do stuff, maybe have them defend the player when using heavy weapons, maybe spot enemies. The important thing is that they should stop pushing me into walls while I'm using mortars. And done. That was all the bad things I noticed in the enlisted alpha. Now I know it's an alpha, but the loot box progression system, the superiority of unlocked equipment and farmed squads, and the kind of bad tank balance are all stuff that have a big chance to actually make it into the finished game, unless the community is vocal about it. Also, once again, the mortar has to go, it's too strong. It is fun to use, game winning, and made me climb plenty of scoreboards, but it has to go. I know I've been very negative in this video, so once again let me say that the game is fun, the gunplay is solid, the squad system is a good concept, and the balance between guns is fine. Of course, submachine guns are better in this urban environment, but even the basic bolt action rifle was extremely lethal. Lastly, the bot's stupidity is still entertaining. It might get annoying after just a few weeks, but stuff like seeing them run away from the battlefield for no reason killed me. And I mean literally because I switched to them, they were outside of the battlefield, so I died, so that's the joke. They're still the Achilles heel of this game. Not only they're bad, but some classes like Sniper and AT people don't really want bots near them to attract the enemy attention. Although since the kill cam shows you where you've been shot from, there's not much reason to just hide behind a corner or a bush. I'm cautiously optimistic about Enlisted. Having an AI control squad in a reasonably realistic multiplayer FPS, it's a pretty interesting idea. But if not developed enough or if ruined by the business model, it will completely backfire. That's all for now. I don't plan to make a video every time a surprise Enlisted alpha drops, but I will cover more of it in the future. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. See ya!